2 minutes to air and 1 minute to live stream. One minute to air. We are now live streaming.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is now the 7 o'clock hour here on September the 5th, 2023, and I will now call the Durham City Council meeting to order for this night. We welcome those who have decided to join us here in chambers, as well as those who have joined us remotely. And I would invite you all to a moment of silence before we get to the people's business this evening. And thank you all. We now turn to Councilwoman Freeman, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. It's our practice to stand and salute the flag.
Before we have our roll call, I would like to offer to our colleagues that are, to my colleagues that Councilwoman Johnson will not be joining us tonight. She had an unexpected trip out of town, and I would entertain a motion for that. And then we'll call it.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Williams, seconded by Councilwoman Freeman. All those in favor, if you just sign by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. Hearing none, Madam Clerk, if you will call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mayor O'Neill,
I am here.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton,
I'm here.
Councilmember Caballero,
Here.
Councilmember Freeman,
Present.
Councilmember Holsey-Hymen,
Present.
Councilmember Johnson has an excused absence, and Councilmember Williams.
I'm here.
Thank you.
We have 3 ceremonial items tonight. The first will be presented by Councilwoman Holsey-Hymen, which is the National Recovery Month Proclamation. The second will be the Welcoming Week Proclamation, which will be read to our hearing by Councilwoman Caballero, and I will read our virtue of the month with this generosity after that.
Good evening to our residents. Good evening to my colleagues. I am going to be reading the National Recovery Month Proclamation. I'm going to ask Michelle McKinney to come forward, who is the CEO of Recovery Community of Durham, the founder and CEO of Recovery Community of Durham. How are you? Whereas the cost of not encouraging mental health and substance abuse recovery is significant for our individual families, neighborhoods, and the community at large. And whereas recovery from mental and substance abuse disorder occurs every day through a variety of prevention, recovery support resources, and treatment programs. People in recovery strive to achieve healthy lifestyles, stable homes, meaningful daily activities, stronger neighborhoods, and contribute to the positive way of life in larger communities. Whereas people with untreated mental health substance abuse disorders are at high risk for unhealthy and unsafe behaviors, including alcohol or drug misuse, violence or self-destructive behavior, and suicide. And whereas to help more people achieve and sustain long-term recovery, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Recovery Community of Durham invite all residents of Durham to participate in the National Recovery Month. Now, therefore, I, Elaine M. O'Neill, Mayor of City of Durham, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2023 as National Recovery Month in Durham, and residents to observe the month with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies to celebrate people in recovery and those who support them. Everyone's journey is different, but we can all reach it together. Witnessed by the hand and corporate seal of the City of Durham, North Carolina, this 5th day of September 2023. Mayor Elaine M. O'Neill, the mayor. And I also like to say, as a over 30-year social worker and a professor of social worker at North Carolina Central University, I stand with you, and I'm very honored to be able to present this proclamation to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Michelle McKinney. On behalf of the Planning Committee, I would like to thank Mayor O'Neill and the City Council members for this proclamation and your ongoing support for recovery in Durham. This year's theme is Recovery is for Everyone. Every person, every family, every community emphasizes that people in recovery achieve healthy and purposeful lives. I am in recovery. I am a recovery addict of 12 years. Thank you. We offer stable families and we contribute in positive ways to the larger community. September is National Recovery Month, and we are planning to celebrate the millions of people in recovery from mental and substance use disorders on Friday, September the 22nd. That's Friday, September the 22nd, from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Durham Central Park. This event is free. It is free and open to the public. So we hope that everyone who is supportive of recovery will come out to celebrate this fact that people move into recovery every day, right here in Durham. Given all that has happened over the last 2 years, we all know someone who needs support. So come celebrate with us. There's gonna be live music, line dancing, information from all local providers, children activities, inspiring speakers like myself who will affirm that through a multitude of pathways, people can and do recover. And we need to celebrate their success. And of course, you all are invited to attend. So please come out and help us celebrate National Recovery Month. Thank you.
And I will have my line dance boots ready.
Good evening, everyone. I will be reading a proclamation for Welcoming Week, and I'd like to invite Nayo, who is our Immigrant and Refugee Coordinator for the city and the county. Whereas Welcoming Week was launched in 2012 by Welcoming America as an annual campaign and celebration to showcase the movement of communities striving to be more welcoming places for all, including immigrants. And whereas U.S. Census data reflects that 14.7% of the city of Durham's population is foreign-born, compared to 13.5% of the nation's population being foreign-born. And whereas Welcoming Week provides individuals and communities the opportunity to proclaim and exercise their welcoming values through events and initiatives that build stronger relationships between native-born and foreign-born residents. And whereas communities that invoke the concept of welcoming and belonging are postured to embrace and harness and leverage the beauty of their residents' diversity of culture and experiences, and whereas realizing our vision for a welcoming community requires actively addressing the lived experiences of those in our community who do not feel welcome, safe, valued, or included, and whereas the city of Durham strives to be a welcoming, diverse, and innovative community that prioritizes racial equity, and ensuring that those who have been historically excluded from decision-making have a voice. And whereas the city of Durham aims to strengthen its foundation and improve the quality of life for all residents through its commitment to foster communities that are connected, engaged, and diverse. Now, therefore, I, Elaine M. O'Neill, Mayor of the City of Durham, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim September 9th through 17, 2023 as Welcoming Week in Durham, and urge all residents to intentionally seek opportunities to remove individual, institutional, and systemic barriers so that Durham is a city where all residents, regardless of their origin of birth, are welcome and have a sense of belonging. Witness my hand in the corporate seal of the City of Durham this 5th day of September 2023.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nayo, Refugee Community. I am the Durham Immigrants and Refugee Affairs Coordinator. The one I said before is just to get you all in the mood of what I was going to say. So I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to the City Council and as well as the Durham Board of Commissioners for creating this position, which is meant to bridge the resources and the immigrant community. And this week, the Welcoming Week, is also a great opportunity for residents in Durham to get to know their neighbors. We are here to make this place a vibrant place. It is almost 8 p.m. Do you mind if I go in French? Just kidding. We have several languages, and we can speak all that, and that you can see that those in your schools, your kids mingle with the immigrants and refugee kids, which is bringing them a huge amount of knowledge from outside of Durham, North Carolina, the U.S., without them going over there. So this Welcoming Week is to celebrate everyone that is here, that is born outside of the U.S., and I thank you all. Thank you for having me, and you will be seeing me around a lot. Connect with me, let's work together, let's get this place a lot better for everyone. I would like to invite Jenny Bell from the Neighborhood Improvement Services. They have done a lot to put this event together. Thank you.
I just wanted to say a few things very quickly. As you came through the doors, you saw this beautiful quilt that was hanging in the lobby. That quilt is actually one example of the welcoming work that we have been able to do. It was made by 6 immigrant women, and it represents, if you look at it, they each made 2 squares, one that represents their life in their home country and one that represents their life in Durham. So please take a time to look at that. That's just the beginning of this work that we've been doing. And I would like to recognize, we have some of those women with us here tonight. Las costureras del mundo, as they call themselves, the sewers of the world. Jenny, I must. And then I also want to give a shout out to my team, as well as Nayo, with community engagement, neighborhood improvement services. We have some really great events, all free, 5 events, everything that you could be interested in, from soccer to music to food, all free. Everyone is invited, and that's on our website, durhamcommunityengagement.org. So thank you.
Say generosity, everybody, generosity. Okay. Whereas our daily lives are filled with information regarding crime, violence, inequity, and natural disasters, often causing feelings of helplessness, and whereas the many daily acts of extending patience and kindness that occur in our community are largely unobtrusive, and whereas by recognizing the need for extending grace, being patient, and showing compassion, all members of our community will be made aware of the importance. Whereas the purpose of Generosity Month is to remember to give to others, not simply from abundance, but giving things because it is good for others. Everyone is essential, every life has value, and our different paths give us various advantages and obstacles. And whereas when we show compassion and benevolence, we consider those differences and we are prioritizing understanding, breaking barriers, and supporting one another. And whereas by contributing to society, we are honoring the true meaning of Labor Day and creating a community that is welcoming, inclusive, kind, and a safe place to live, work, and play. And whereas the City of Durham honors those who positively influence our community. Now, therefore, I, Elaine M. O'Neill, Mayor of this great city of Durham, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2022 as Generosity Month in Durham, and hereby urge all residents to practice showing compassion, spreading kindness and respect, consideration, and generosity to others at all times. Witness my hand and the corporate seal of the City of Durham, this the 5th day of September 2023. In my first act of generosity tonight, one of our city workers, and we have a lot of city workers here in here with us tonight. Mr. Strabino, he said, Mayor, can we have 3 minutes on your agenda? I said, sure you can. I can't say no to our city workers. So at this time, I'm going to call Mr. Chris Benjamin in lieu of me giving my announcements and give you all that 3 minutes. There's one person who's going to speak on behalf of the city workers. You come now, right here. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you to the mayor and all the people that's sitting on the board. My first name is Chris, last name Benjamin. I want to thank all the solid waste department coming out, showing their gratitude, and I appreciate that humbly. It don't start with me, it starts with my whole management department, from admin to operations to the collectors. It's all of us. And we just have a few special demands that we want to, rectify based on what we've been going through, because as essential workers, we're overworked and we're underpaid, of course, like every other department that's essential workers. We just basically want to, put this out and have a time frame when you guys can talk about some of the stuff that we need effective. Cost of living increase, annual raise. We want to talk about the hazard pay, better equipment, and I feel we should start paying our drivers at least $35 an hour. Collectors making about $28 an hour because we go over and beyond every day. And we want to talk about, getting a $5,000 bonus effective immediately, because we've missed a lot of steps, prior to COVID. So we're in agreement when you guys can, come and sit down and talk to us, because we're not going nowhere. We're here to stand, and we're going to, let our presence be known, because we make it happen for the city. And if I can't leave nothing behind, I want to pay something forward. That's my time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And like I said, I will be foregoing my announcements. And I will look now to my left to see if there are any announcements by my colleagues on my left.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to say thank you to our Immigrant Affairs Office. Thank you for representing. Japal from Say Umpu. Thank you, and it's all right to speak French whenever you want. But specifically for what's going on here tonight, to see all of, I see our city staff, our city workers here, but what I also see is the narrative that folks don't usually talk about, and I see a lot of black men working, and I appreciate that. I know what people say about us in the streets, but thank you for being committed, and I want you to know that we're committed as well, and we're going to find a way to get there. And I know we have a lot of ladies working as well, but I see overwhelmingly a large representation of black men handling your responsibilities, and I just want to say I see you, and I appreciate that.
To my right, colleagues.
Thank you. I also want to just thank you all for being here this evening, especially as city workers, and knowing that this past budget cycle we weren't able to make that 2% increase. It's heartbreaking, but I do know that this cycle we will make sure that that is done. And I do want to hold up the petition that you shared, and noting that I think it's reasonable to ask for these demands, just in light of how much exertion you have to do to fill in those vacancies as workers for the city. I also just wanted to note, this weekend we had both NCCU and Duke win their football games, and what was disturbing to me was to notice for any Spectrum viewers, they were unable to see most of that because it was on ABC. And what I'm noting is that there's this lack or this gap that's developing where you're paying more for your services and getting less. And just as workers, you're doing more and getting less, and we have to be able to do something about that. And so I do want to bring it to the attention of council and figure out what we can do, because I noticed DTV8 is unavailable and all of those channels, but we're still paying the same rates. There's an underswell of there's a different kind of inflation, and I'm not sure how it's going to land or work, but I do want you to know that I'm here and I'm fighting for you, and I'm making sure that I'm paying attention to the needs of our city and the people in this city, and I do want to appreciate you all for being here tonight.
Any other announcements?
Thank you. Good evening. I also want to just say thank you to the city workers who came to speak this evening. We know you all work very, very hard. Yesterday being Labor Day, it's clear that labor is on the rise again in this country, and that's a good thing. I also want to just talk briefly about Welcoming Week. I just want to thank both NIS and NIO for all the work that they're doing in this during this week. It's really important. So next week will be the 50th anniversary of the Chilean coup. I am Chilean, and so the kind of convergence of both Welcoming Week and that are interesting and hard. A historic event that predates me by several years happened, and it changed the trajectory of my family's history. We emigrated to the United States partly because my father was in a field that was being persecuted in Chile at the time. Ironically, so were a lot of labor organizers. A lot of labor organizers had to flee because they were being detained, tortured, killed, and they left. And so next week, there will be a gathering of Chileans in Durham. I look forward to that gathering. But it is, when we see what's happening in this country, it is consistently a reminder that we can lose democracy easily. We've almost lost democracy in this country. And the after effects on a culture and a society do not go away for a long time. I have family that does not speak to one another. I have family that has not seen each other in decades because they are so politically polarized from an event that happened 50 years ago. My uncle was detained and was able to get out because my grandmother was able to find him and get him out quickly enough. And he fled. He left Chile for a long time. And then when was able to return, was blacklisted because he was an attorney that had worked for the Allende government. The Allende government is who was kicked out of Chile. All of these things are reminders of how important it is to vote, how important it is to participate, how important it is to show up and to protest. So thank you for being here this evening. It is not lost on me at all, the power that you all hold and how important it is.
I'm sorry, I have given up all the time that I can, okay? But you can come back on Thursday and sign up at the regular Citizens Matters at 1 o'clock, okay? We are now moving to the city manager's priority items.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Durham City Council. I have 2 priority items for you this evening. Agenda item number 22, Consolidated Annexation 1102 and 1034 South Miami Boulevard. The agenda memo, attachment number 1, under police personnel expenses were revised from 706,512 to 1177520, and that reflects a 10-year period. Agenda item number 26, engagement plan update for Unified Development Ordinance text amendment simplifying codes for affordable development, TC 22000001. A supplemental item was added, but this item is being referred back to the City County Planning Department. Those are the only 2 items I have for you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We now turn to our city attorney for any priority items she may have.
Thank you, Mayor O'Neill, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, members of the council. It's good to see you. The city attorney's office has no priority items this evening.
Thank you, Attorney Rayburg. I'll now turn to our city clerk for any priority items she may have.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. The City Clerk's office has no priority items tonight.
Thank you so much. The next order of business is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of all of items that the council has previously considered in a work session. All items on the consent agenda may be approved by a single vote of the council. Items may be removed from the consent agenda by a council member or member of the public, and those items will be considered separately at the end of the meeting tonight. I am going to read through the entire agenda. At this time, beginning with the consent agenda. Item number 1 is the Workforce Development Board appointments. Number 2, July 2023 bid report. Item 4 is the American Rescue Plan Act ARPA project, Merrick Moore Community Preservation Project. Item 5 is the Durham Open Space and Trails Interlocal Agreement update. Item 6, FY24 interlocal agreement with Durham County regarding Bull City United and Project Bill. Item 7 is to renew the contract with North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts for the domestic violence caseload. Item 8 is to renew contract with North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts for gang reduction caseload. Item 9 is the contract renewal with Legal Aid of North Carolina to administer the Durham Expunction and Restoration DEER program. Item 10 is the Limited Obligation Bond Series 2023. 11 is the 2023 second quarter crime report. A presentation was made during the August 24, 2023 work session. Item 12 is joint funding agreement with the U.S. Geological Survey for operation and maintenance of the City of Durham rainfall and stream flow network. Item 13 is a contract amendment number 2 for SD 2021-06 municipal separate storm sewer system MS4 inspection. Item 14, professional services contract award to Hazen and Sawyer PC for planning for biosolids treatment and renewable energy at the North and South Durham water reclamation facilities. Item 15, it's a contract amendment number 2 to the professional engineering services contract with Freeze and Nichols, Inc. for the South Durham Phase 3 hydraulic model. Number 16 is a resolution to authorize an application for a drinking water state revolving fund-led service line replacement no interest loan and grant. Number 25 is the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Program Grant Offer 3-37-005-6-064-2023 Grant 64. We now turn to our general business agenda and our public hearings, beginning with item 21 is the Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Phase Development and Tree Preservation. 22 is the Consolidated Annexation 1102 and 1034 South Miami Boulevard. Item 23 is zoning map change 301 Infinity Road. Item 24, proposed updates to connection pump station review and flow monitoring fees. Item number 26 is the supplemental item, which is the engagement plan update for Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, simplifying codes for affordable development, TC 22000001. All right. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Councilwoman Freeman, seconded by Councilwoman Holsey-Hymen. Madam Clerk, if you open the vote. Okay. You don't have your clicker? Okay. You may close the vote and report out. Oh. I think you may have to redo it because Councilwoman Holsey-Hymen did not get a chance to vote. Okay.
It worked.
Great.
The motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. We now will turn right to our item 21, public hearings. The first up is item 21, the Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, Phase Development and Tree Preservation. And this is a non-zoning hearing, I believe, and we will receive our staff report.
Good evening. My name is Robin Schultz. I am a senior planner / arborist with the Planning Department. Before we begin, we'd like to state for the record that all Planning Department public hearing items have been noticed in accordance with the state and local laws, and affidavits of these notices are on file and available from the Planning Department. This evening, I am presenting information about a proposed Unified Development Ordinance Text Amendment, case TC 22-00004, phase development and tree preservation. So the why of this text amendment. As Durham continues to see an increase in the amount of large residential developments, there have been repeated concerns from residents, board members, and staff, including issues with erosion control, especially for large tracts, emphasis on tree replacement rather than tree preservation, and large residential neighborhoods with little to no topographical character and/or poor soil health. We are tackling this through a four-pronged approach with changes to 4 articles within the UDO. Primarily Article 8, Environmental Protection. It includes the creation of a tiered system of tree preservation and phased development, addition of incentives for tree preservation, and inclusion of the compact neighborhood tier within those standards, except for sites that are zoned for the design district. The next change is going to be within Article 9, landscaping and buffering, which we will propose to increase the current buffering standards so that any residential development which masquerades will now have to provide a buffer with an opacity of 0.6, which is approximately 30 feet. In Article 13, additional subdivision requirements, we have established a new section 13.6, phase development, which creates a maximum cap of 50 acres for any singular phase. And denotes that lots in previous phases must be stabilized before any new phases begin. This section establishes other phasing requirements which will be covered later. And lastly, as a result of public input, we've also made changes to Article 7, the design standards, by incorporating grading setbacks. So in response to those ongoing concerns regarding the impacts of grading on neighboring properties, we've added a new UDO section to the design standards called grading setbacks. When projects utilize mass grading, which is grading of 4 acres or more, an additional 10-foot no grading setback shall be required from all exterior boundaries of the development site. Projects which grade but do not qualify as mass grading shall provide a 5-foot no grading setback. The exceptions for this are grading for trail construction, utilities, access, infrastructure, or code-required plantings. So getting into the proposed tier system, so things to note are that it focuses on residential development. The ability to utilize tree replacement still exists, but there's a strong incentive for preservation. It promotes smaller phases of grading and more distribution of canopy coverage, and it includes incentives for affordable housing, varied housing types, and further environmental protection. For projects with phases that do not exceed 35 acres, they shall be required to have 20% of tree preservation. Projects which include one of the incentives above can also utilize 20%. For projects with 35 acres or greater, they shall be required to have 30% of tree preservation in each phase which exceeds 35 acres. So each option includes the ability to utilize tree replacement if preservation is not possible, though the amounts of tree replacement are higher for larger phases. The tables underneath both options depict the required tree replacement for each level of preservation provided. So I wanted to provide some visual examples. In example 1, the parcel is 100 acres. Each phase will be 20 acres and will therefore be required to have 20% tree coverage. 20% of 20 acres is 4 acres per phase. In the second example, the same parcel is still 100 acres. 2 phases will be 35 acres and 1 will be 30 acres. Phases 1 and 2 will require 30% of tree preservation, approximately 11.5 acres of tree preservation per phase, and phase 3 will only require 20% of tree preservation, roughly 6 acres. The main takeaways from the examples are that larger phases will require more overall tree coverage, and as a reminder, tree coverage functions as the sum of both preservation and replacement. In example 1, smaller phases amounted to 20 acres of tree preservation, whereas in example 2, the larger phases resulted in 29 acres of total tree preservation. These examples don't include tree replacement, but remember that the amount of required tree replacement is always more than what is required with just tree preservation. Moving on to the boundary buffer changes, we've made a slight change to the required project boundary buffers. When residential projects utilize mass grading, the project boundary buffers will be updated from 0.4 opacity to 0.6 opacity, which, as I said before, is roughly 30 feet. Currently, the UDO only requires this for residential developments in the suburban tier. The new text amendment will expand this to projects in every tier that propose mass grading for residential projects. 13.6 is a new UDO section to be established, which will denote the additional requirements for phase grading and subdivisions. The main takeaways are that no phase can be greater than 50 acres. Each phase shall be able to stand alone. And note that some plans will only have one phase. There are additional provisions within the section, but I am not going to read them all to you. But they relate to the specifics of phasing, infrastructure, tree preservation, and erosion control. So we've received a lot of input as to checking in on Cary's grading ordinance. After speaking with their staff, we've determined the following. Cary's grading ordinance functions as a three-tiered system based on density rather than land disturbance, such as we're proposing. Projects which exceed 8 units per acre have no grading limit, though it is worth noting that they have stricter standards for lower density projects. Additionally, Cary does not have a provision in their ordinance for tree coverage, just open space, champion tree preservation, and buffers. Our proposal accounts for grading restrictions regardless of the density. Additionally, we require tree coverage and open space, buffering, and specimen tree preservation. Cary's ordinance allows for more flexibility in the grading restrictions, and ours does not. It is worth noting that Durham was recently audited by the state for sedimentation and erosion control and was determined as meeting or exceeding state standards. And lastly, I just wanted to provide some quick math regarding the proposed amendment. The maximum amount of grading which could occur within a phase within that first tier is 27.92 acres. The maximum amount of grading which could occur within a phase within the second tier is 35 acres. Note that these calculations are based on the assumption of tree preservation rather than tree replacement. If utilizing tree replacement, projects would ultimately need to provide more tree coverage. Finally, note that the grading tier will not change the fact that projects will still need to provide all other ordinance required plantings, such as street trees, vehicle use area plantings, and screening. Thank you, and staff is available if there are any questions.
Thank you so much. You've heard the report from our staff, and I will now declare this public hearing to be open and will first entertain questions and comments from the council. To my left first. Okay, we'll go to the right. Any questions or comments from council? Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. I know when you're talking about the grading specifically, that there's just a 10-foot, I guess, boundary buffer. Is there anything to account for any slopes that might create a cliff?
We did not account for slopes in those no setbacks, but that's definitely something that we can consider moving forward, especially with the UDO rewrite when we see how these setbacks sort of play out.
Okay. And then, I guess I just want to ask if you would think that there would be any concern raised around, it's almost as if you're pitting whatever the incentives are, like if it was affordable housing against the trees, if it would be one or the other, not both.
Right, and so part of our thinking with that was we wanted to provide multiple incentives just so that it didn't seem as though it were just affordable housing or trees. It's also worth noting that the baseline tier that they would be moving back towards with those incentives is what we have determined to be a sufficient amount of tree coverage. We don't consider it to be less or fewer. So that's sort of how we argued with that too.
I think this is a good start. I really appreciate staff taking this on. I would like to see something around the slopes because I'm concerned after seeing that one cliff, what we could do, what would be possible. So that's the only other additional request, but outside of that, I think I can support moving this forward.
Any other comments? Turn it back to my left again. All right, okay. Thank you so much. Now we will entertain questions, comments from our citizens who have signed up to speak to us, and we have several here in chambers as well as a couple on the internet. First we'll have, and I'll call 5 names, and you will have 3 minutes apiece. And you just have to state your name. You don't have to give us an address unless you want to. Ms. Wanda Allen, Donna Stanback, Pam Williams, Keenan Kander, and Robin Barefoot. That's actually 6 people. And then Ms. Katie Ross, and that will actually be all of our speakers who have signed up in here. Right. Yeah. We have a couple still on the internet. Ms. Allen?
You guys ready? You ready for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm Wanda Allen. I'm sorry. I'm Wanda Allen, and I'm here tonight to address the tree preservation. I want you to take a look at the slide. Take a look at this slide here. The current proposal that is being presented tonight. This photo is the conservation community, and the current proposal will not improve this area at all. As you can see in the background, the only thing that is left are trees. These trees were left along the background here because the developer could not use this land. This is along a creek area. Also, this also shows that when you do the mass grading that we are dealing with, when you do the mass grading like it is demonstrated in this photo here, you see how it runs into our creeks and to our pond. That photo that we just saw of that conservation subdivision, the proposed tree preservation will not improve any of these problems that we currently have. I'd also like for us to just pause for a few minutes and let's learn from Wake County and Cary. I read today that they have started addressing where they have allowed so many trees to be cut out, and now they're prioritizing how they're going to address the issues of no longer tree preservation. Again, I encourage you not to vote for the tree preservation proposal that was put tonight.
Good evening. My name is Donna Stainback. I'm a lifelong Durham resident. I'd like to thank the Planning Department for its hard work on this initiative, and I support the initiative. I just have some issues with the numbers. I'm a mathematician. It always happens. So we would like to request a change of 50 acres maximum to 20 acres. We'd like to revise section 13.9 on the phase development preliminary plats and site plans shall indicate proposed phasing with no individual phase exceeding 20 acres. We request no phases because Charlotte has 20-acre phases, Wake Forest has 20-acre, and we heard discussion about the 25 acres for Cary. All of the municipalities do not have as much Triassic Basin soil and impaired creeks as Southeast Durham, which, as you know, I represent in a lot of meetings. Significantly more runoff with 50 acres than proposed 20 acres. You'll see that. We've carried some members of the council out to the Ellicksons and the runoff that goes directly into Lick Creek. This Olive Grove had 28 acres, just a few over 20, and the erosion was massive. The clear cutting and mass grading up to the floodplain boundaries. We've had several community inputs that were listed as attachments on the Durham City server that were requesting less than 50-acre maximums, and that included the Sound River. Samantha Crop requested in the input that she gained from her team. I was requesting 20 acres from the get-go, from the concept of this maximum phase. We'd also like to have a clarification for 13.9, Section D, for the land disturbing activity. I just want to make sure that all the developers, whether they want to recognize it or not, include clear cutting as the land disturbing, and do not start that until the subsequent or the previous phase has reached its life cycle. So again, this is the Olive Branch Retention Pond. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Pam Williams. My address is on record. I want to thank the Planning Department for all the hard work and time spent on this, on revising these ordinances. We really appreciate it. I personally appreciate the increased boundary buffer of 30 feet with the 06 opacity and the 10-foot no grading setback, which I hope truly means no disturbance within 10 feet of the property line. I would ask that no variances be approved to reduce these conditions, since these are considered minimum in my opinion. There are lots of concerns with mass grading per phase limit being set at 50 acres with only 30% tree preservations. As many of you have seen, grading approximately 50 acres on Sweetbriar 1001 Olive Branch Road have caused a filing of intent for a Clean Water Act violation. This is 50 acres that caused this. This area started clearing in summer of 2020, and as of today, no homes have been built. Earth is still being moved. This is a long time for land to be disturbed with very little vegetation. This is the one reason why the maximum should be around 25. Tree preservation should not be double counted if it is in a flood zone or a stream buffer. This is one of the recommendations by staff when the amendment first started last summer. As at 1102 South Miami Boulevard, which you'll see soon, it is perceived that mature trees are being provided more than the minimum, but the acres of tree coverage is located mainly in the stream buffer or the land that couldn't be developed. This is the same issue with Infinity Road that you'll see tonight, with most of the tree preservation in the floodplain. Heat islands need to be addressed now. All should have mature trees for all areas of a development, and it shouldn't be where the affordable housing people have less just because there's some affordable housing. I personally don't think it should be tied to the tree preservation. And these are my comments, and thank you for your consideration of these issues.
Is Ms. Motley in chambers? I have her both on chambers and online. Just want to make sure. Okay, she's online. Okay, come on, Mr. Keenan. Mr. Keenan, Conder.
Yes.
Robin Barefoot, and Ms. Katie Ross.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Keenan Conder, and therefore I apologize for my handwriting on my sign-in card. I'm an attorney with Morningstar Law Group, and I'd like to discuss the phase development and tree preservation text amendment, and I'd also like to talk about trade-offs. As you know, the city is experiencing a housing crisis. Housing in Durham is becoming more expensive, and the city must build more homes, and more homes that are affordable to a larger swath of Durham's current and future residents. One way to build more homes is to utilize economies of scale. Generally, larger projects are able to diffuse set building costs amongst more homes, and therefore they can reduce the eventual sale prices. They can eventually reduce the construction price of those homes and therefore the sale prices of those homes. But unfortunately, this amendment will make that more difficult by forcing projects to be broken down into smaller phases, thus reducing the opportunity for economies of scale, thus increasing cost of housing. Now, by doing this, Generally, this amendment will make the cost of homes greater, and therefore it is a significant consequence. That's the trade-off. And on the other hand, what benefits do we get as a city for this hit in housing affordability? And unfortunately, it's arguably not much. By forcing housing projects to be broken down into phases, the city does not eventually or ultimately save more trees. It merely delays their removal. It slows down the clear cutting of 100 acres into 20-acre increments. And while in the short term, during the construction phase, that may reduce some issues related to erosion, in the long term, there is minimal environmental benefit. And this is doubly so if these amendments discourage developers from providing other measures, such as permanent stormwater control measures. Generally, it's easier to provide stormwater control measures for 100 acres at once than 20 acres at a time. So similarly, this amendment also has short-term benefits to Durham's appearance. By phasing tree cutting, you may make larger residential tracts more attractive during construction, but in the end, the residential development may look the same as before the passage of this amendment. The same number of trees may still be cut down. So ultimately, do these short-term benefits outweigh the hit to housing affordability, a crisis that is already being felt so acutely by all of Durham's residents and all of Durham's future residents potentially? Ultimately, I think this answer is no, but it is up to this council to decide those necessary trade-offs. So thank you. I urge you to vote against this amendment, and thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name's Robin Barefoot, and if the lawyers at Morningstar are opposed to this amendment, then I probably should be in favor of it because I don't agree with anything that they say. But I came up here tonight holding 19 pages of the Wake County Land Cover Analysis and Tree Canopy Assessment Report. It's 108 pages long, and it is a geospatial analysis to identify and measure countywide land cover, including tree canopy. It measures the tree canopy and vegetation and impervious surfaces and bare soil of 548,000 acres of Wake County into its 12 core municipalities, Apex, Cary, Fuquay, Varina, et cetera. It measures all kinds of details, including the average land surface temperatures. And what was most profoundly noticeable to me is that it puts dollars next to this tree canopy. It says that the total value of Wake County's tree canopy right now is worth $3.2 billion. The trees store carbon at $1.7 billion. They have total annual benefits of removing pollutants, including carbon dioxide, and intercepting gallons of stormwater. That's $1.4 billion of value. This makes a per capita benefit of the Wake County tree canopy at $2,800 per person. So every person in Wake County benefits from the trees in Wake County by $2,800 a year. I'm going to hand this up to Councilwoman Freeman, if I may. You'll take that and share it with your team. I think what I want to say is that I think the point of this good work, which I love the focus of this, is that we're paying attention to the trees, and we're not paying attention to why the trees are coming down. And I think that the mass grading and the rate of development, and I don't mean how many developments, I mean the voraciousness with which the developers are approaching these developments, taking all the trees down, taking all the soil apart in order to build, really has everything to do with their profit margin and nothing to do with affordable housing, and certainly not about preserving our tree canopy. Everyone deserves mature trees. Mature trees are keeping us alive, and so I want you to oppose this. And then I want our team to do better work. And if there needs to be a task force to talk about the trees, sign me up. Thank you.
Hi, Katie Ross from Bahama. So everybody that has talked so far has done a great job and obviously has gone deep into the weeds on this issue.
I do not have the level of expertise on this particular amendment to the UDO or addition to the UDO. But I am very concerned about the deforestation of our area. We have seen so many natural disasters in recent years that have just taken out communities. The hurricanes that are headed our way now, yeah, maybe we're 100 miles in, but that is not enough. They can come up through the Gulf, as they have recently, down in Florida, and just take out whole communities. God's given us a natural protection against this kind of thing, and that would be our forest and trees. They hold the soil in place, and they control and moderate the release of carbons into the atmosphere. And they do release oxygen. So on every level, from our breathing to our just protection from wind and soil erosion, we need to protect the trees. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, the attorney from Morningstar just talked about how these massive developments are going to bring down housing costs. I haven't seen that. Ever since, I moved 3 years ago, I regularly go on Zillow. And I have not, still, because it's fun, but I have not seen a lot of reduction in prices in the Durham area, which is where we were looking and are in Durham County. That theory, it doesn't seem to hold water. What happens is it is cheaper for the developers, but where is it in your approvals? Where is it in the UDO? That because they've built for cheaper, they're going to sell for cheaper. I don't know any law that says they have to do that. And what I do know is if they're investors, they have the opposite impetus. Look, we built cheaper, and now we can sell high, and now we're all going to make a lot of money. So I just think this is something that you should have in mind, and if it's really making housing cheaper, where is the proof? Where is the evidence? Show us that all of those mass developments are bringing down the cost of housing in Durham, and especially at the price of the environment. The other thing I would say is I'm kind of on a streak now, and I'm doing a digger deep for myself, and I hope I will be able to with a group studying the UDO on the enforcement levels. How are these requirements, even if this is passed as proposed, how is it going to be enforced? We need, you can't force just citizens to have to come forward and do that. So that's what I'm looking into, and I hope that we all can do that together. Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Those are all the cards that I have for persons who have signed up to speak to us tonight. We do have 2 persons on the internet, Mr. Andrew Hefner, followed by Ms. Tina Motley Person. If there are others that are online, if you would raise your hand during this time, as we hear from Mr. Hefner. Mr. Hefner, you will have 3 minutes. Can you hear me, Mr. Hefner? I see he's online. Let's try Ms. Motley Person. Ms. Tina Motley, are you there? Let's just make sure that we are not having any technical issues.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. If
Can you
you
hear
will
me?
go first, Ms. Motley. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Oh, can you hear me now? You
Yes.
just said it. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So I was going to say they had a slide to put up for me, which it's I guess it doesn't matter if it's up or not, but it's one slide. I don't know if Pam Williams would like to put that up. But anyway, good evening, Mayor Neal and members of the City Council. My name, of course, is Tina Motley Pearson. And, it's been said that Durham has very strict regulations regarding protecting water quality. And it sounds great on paper, but in reality, developers can easily get a variance for trees, buffers, wetlands, and streams, One example is a tree variance of 57 specimen trees to accommodate 5 homes and a quarter-mile of sewer. Another example is a single developer variance of buffer requirements to over 118,000 linear feet of stream and over 21,500 square feet of wetlands. So if a developer can easily get a variance for trees, buffers, wetlands, and streams, then are your current regulations merely suggestions? And I'd also like to note from your planning department presentation, I'd like to bring your attention to the following quote. 0.6 opacity is approximately 30 feet in width and 60% opaque when plants have matured. And I'd like to ask staff, what exactly does this mean? It sounds like you can cut down a bunch of large mature trees and then replace them with little saplings and say you met the requirements. How is this saving more trees? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and we were able to get your slide up, so we were able to view that. Mr. Hefner? Mr. Hefner, are you able to hear me, sir?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you for listening to me tonight. I am in support of this measure. I think it's a very small step in the right direction. I've been a resident on Pleasant Drive for 20 years now, and I have some real serious concerns about the future. Some of the issues are, I think, misinterpretation. In the proposals, you have tree replacement instead of tree saving, and those are not equivalent. You can't cut down a 250-year-old oak and put a sapling up and say it's the same thing. That's just not true. I think there is a huge difference between mature tree growth and replacements, and it's not equivalent. I think further, it's not just trees numbers and the area they cover, it's whether or not you're destroying woodlands and replacing it with isolated buffers of a few trees here and there, because the woodlands provide a habitat and they promote diversity of wildlife and many other things. And a few trees as little islands stuck out there, it's not the same thing. It doesn't function the same way. So I think you need to take a broader view of preservation and not just counting trees and how many acres. The habitat to me is just as important as the number of trees in the area. And if you're not leaving a large chunk of trees intact, then there's no place for habitat for animals. And that should be part of the consideration when you're making up these regulations. And another question I have is, why is it accepted that mass grading, clear cutting, and mass compacting of soil is a perfectly fine way to develop residential neighborhoods? I think it's not. I think it's horribly destructive, and there are much better options that preserve a lot more and don't do such horrible decimation of streams, creeks, wetlands, so forth. So please take those into consideration. I mean, you can write the rules, you can change what is allowed, and I hope you will. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I believe that those are the only 2 persons who were signed up, but we've seen no hands on the internet. I'll just check with our clerk to make sure. All right. All right. I believe that I've covered everybody who wishes to speak on this item, and we will let the record reflect that no one else has requested to speak on this item. And I will now declare this public hearing to be closed, and the matter is back before the council, and we'll be ready to entertain comments. Councilman Williams.
Not attorney. I decided not to go to law school, Madam Mayor. A few clarifying questions for staff. And I think much of this has been said. I just need a little clarification. So I'm not sure what, if I was to take the comments tonight, I'm not sure what everyone wants. It sounds to be a lot, a little all over the place. So I just want a little clarification. First, practically speaking, what does the process look like when it comes to, if you're developing, let's say 100 acres of land? I saw the diagram of smaller phases, but what does that look like practically if I'm building on that site, phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 and so on and so forth?
Right, so your first step is going to be submitting a site plan through the Major Development Review Group, which then would review it and each phase for compliance with the entirety of the UDO as well as that portion, showing the plan of like where you're going to phase, how much tree preservation is in that phase, et cetera. From that point, once that's approved and there's some other administrative steps, you would get a land disturbance permit for the first portion, and then you would not get subsequent portions until it's stabilized per those sections in 13.6 that we established. And worth noting on that is we did discuss this with County Erosion Control about their comfort with this phasing and enforcement and things of that nature, and they were in favor.
All right, so they don't have to go through that process on each phase, correct?
Nope. We just need the site plan to clearly show what they're going to do for the overall development.
Gotcha. So going deeper into the practicality of this, if I'm bringing whatever equipment or labor to clear the first phase, I do what I need to do. Then do I have to bring those? I have to bring those folks back to do the next phase. So what I'm saying is, if I'm clearing out a phase, whatever that process look like, if it's 100 acres of land broken out into 5 phases, do I do that process 5 times?
If that is how you did your phasing, then yes. So you would need to complete that first phase, have it at least stabilized per those sections, and then you could begin grading the next phase.
Gotcha. So I would need to do that process again. All right.
Yep.
So, and what I'm trying to do is get to a point where we have to make a choice, no matter how tough it is. So if I am paying $5 for the first phase for them to clear cut, when I bring them back, I guess it would cost whatever. I would just have to break it down into whatever it would cost in 5 sections. I'm trying to understand the economic impact of the practicality behind this.
Right. Yeah. We definitely mulled that over a lot, which is part of the reason the affordable housing portion is in there as well. There are a few things to consider, just the fact that like lots in Durham are so sporadically shaped. It's just like a function of land use history. So, the way that they actually do those phases, the way that they, potentially lay out utilities, the way they maybe like cluster development, we're sort of hoping that they will, this will in some ways force the hand of better neighborhood development through that. But we definitely.
That's what I was getting to. Are we demanding or are we hoping?
We are low key demanding.
Okay. All right. So we're hoping that folks are going to develop in good faith and not make a direct correlation between, hey, I have to do more, I have to extend my process here, so it's going to cost me more, and I'm going to put that forward to the resident.
So I hear your point. I think ultimately what we decided was that it is difficult to get into the sort of cat and mouse game of lowering regulation with the hope of lowering house prices. It's sort of hard to draw that direct correlation. We've heard repeated concerns about these and have those concerns. And so in that faith is why we propose this amendment, which may increase costs.
So it's worth evaluating, basically, is what I'm hearing, which is probably where I'm leaning toward. Lastly, we're talking about tree preservation, but is this really a mitigation of runoff?
Like preserving trees as a measure of runoff, or a measure of preventing runoff? Yeah. So trees which are preserved do prevent runoff, though that is mostly from soil. So when things are graded of that nature, the soil is compressed and compacted, so that pore space cannot hold the moisture as well, which increases runoff. So tree areas that are left intact do help mitigate runoff.
And would you say this amendment is going to make a significant difference to that?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions on Councilwoman Caballero?
Thank you. How are we going to evaluate? So I hear the point. I will be supporting this evening. There's a lot of residents who are asking us not to support it, and I don't understand it, quite frankly, because they're the ones who initiated it. And I really want to thank staff, because I think you have a lot on your plate right now, including, the comp plan and the UDO rewrite, and to have moved something, because this was part 2, right? So I have a lot of gratitude for that. But I just want to understand how we're going to evaluate it. Because I want to know, I hear their point about cost, but if other communities are already doing it, then they've absorbed the cost in other communities, so kind of suck it up, sorry. So that's what I'm hearing, is that this has been successful in other communities, even if it's different. I get that ours is more about land disturbance versus density, so I understand the point, but we're trying to solve for more of this environmental piece of it. And so I want to understand how we are, because we'll have that opportunity with the UDO rewrite to evaluate it. And so I appreciate that this is now. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, Sarah Young with the Planning Department. So this is definitely one of the things that we will be looking at again. I will tell you that I, for myself, did some quick research into the places that have similar ordinances, not just Cary, but Apex, Charlotte. I did a search of home builders that are building here and that are building in those communities. I didn't do an exhaustive apples to apples, but I just did kind of a gut check look at, are their housing prices drastically different than ours? No, I did not find that. So I think that folks are finding a way to absorb it. I think that there's also something that we don't often talk about, but our market is bearing the housing, prices that we're seeing, which is, separate kind of from land use and costs. Materials costs are back down to basically what they were pre-pandemic, yet housing prices haven't dropped. So there's a lot of things that go into the price point of housing, and, singling out specific ordinance provisions, it's really hard to completely, correlate them to a housing cost issue. So we will definitely be reevaluating it, I think more on the basis of, how is it working? Are we seeing, we are going to be doing some, you all will be hearing about this in the coming months. One of our priorities coming out of the comprehensive plan is going to be some work studying tree canopy and really what that looks like and how we measure it. And so we will have, I think, some other ways to look at whether this is effective or not that honestly may not be housing prices, because that is very difficult, like I said, to attribute to any specific provision.
Yeah, for me, the question, because there was the previous comment of it may force this kind of better development. And so that's what I would like to be able to see. So I also want to note for residents, though, sometimes when you make the building envelope smaller, then the only way you're going to achieve the units is with the terrible word of density. So I just want to also caution folks that in my mind, what I can see is if you're really pushing on tree preservation and some other things, which is great, then that means that your opportunity of where to put what is going to be limited, which is then going to make you potentially have to really think about how you're going to configure your building envelope. And that could result in some pretty interesting, innovative projects, but it may not look what you're used to. And so I think that if we're gonna, it's kind of a give and take. If folks are gonna ask for these more, strident environmental protections, which I support, then we also have to be mindful and open and expansive of what the design's actually gonna look like. And it may not be, a neo-colonial house, because everything else is a neo-colonial house, and that's what you're used to looking at. And so I just want to caution folks around that too, that it could push for some pretty interesting things, and I'm excited to see, and I'm glad that we have the UDO rewrite to kind of help us through this. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, colleagues, and thank you, staff. This is great work. I'm going to encourage us strongly to pass this text amendment tonight. 50 acres is better than 100 acres. 25 is better than 50. 10 is better than 20. 5 is better than 10. The governing lane that we have before us tonight is we're between two polar points. Folk who want absolutely no trees cut down, which is unrealistic, and developers who just want to do whatever they want, which is unacceptable. That is the governing lane we have, and where we have to find a point to land between those two polar points. And I think this text amendment finally is an opportunity for us to do something concrete that respects the legal landscape that we operate within, because if we make the tree preservation too small, where it practically limits development, then it's a de facto moratorium by way of environmental, and then we alert the attention of folk watching us. On the other hand, trees are important. So we have to balance our growth with our values. And no one answer is going to please every one person. I'm always fascinated. The Supreme Court has 9 exquisitely educated people on it. They all have the same exact degree. And they all look at the same document and come up with such divergent opinions. There is no one right answer here. So we have to balance our growth with our values as a city. I want to say, with respect to a couple of things that were said tonight, listen, I respect economies of scale. It's a real concept. A 100-level economics course will teach you about economies of scale. And sometimes we talk about, well, prices haven't gone down. That may not be the right question. The question is, what would it look like, the prices look like, if we stopped building coal? How much higher would they be? Not necessarily them going down, but how much would they inflate if we stopped or if we constricted supply? So I believe in economies of scale, but this is Durham. We also have economies of humanity. Economies of scale have to be held in tension with our values, and we value trees. I also want to push back a little bit that variances aren't easy. Variances are granted through a process that are built in. It's a quasi-judicial process. You have to present evidence. They're not given out like candy. Sometimes they're awarded, sometimes they're not. So I just want to push back against the characterization that they're easy to get. They come after a process. I think the staff has honored requests from our community. This is something that the community has asked for. It's not an ultimate step, but it's a good first step. I also want to thank staff for making tree preservation uniform across tiers. This is important because we're talking about an urban growth boundary, which means that if we're going to say we're not going to grow our city beyond this line, we're going to start getting more dense in the middle. And we want folk who live in the inner city to have just as many trees as our neighbors that live on the perimeter and in the periphery. So that uniformity of tree preservation across tiers is going to be very important, particularly if we institute an urban growth boundary, because we're going to start looking more urban. We're going to start looking more like cities around our country, and trees are important. So I want to urge my colleagues to pass this important first step. That was informed, as Councilman Caballero said, that was informed and pushed and advocated by friends and community members. It honors our values as a city, I believe. It balances our growth, which is real, and our desire to preserve trees, which is real as well. We're not going to land, nothing's going to make anybody 100% happy in this. That's the lane we're in. But I think this is a good first step. I think it addresses balance. It addresses economies of scale. It addresses also the voices of our community. I want to congratulate our staff on doing this great work and say it's the first step, but it's a good first step. It's a real first step that I think doesn't place us in legal jeopardy. It honors our values. It muscularizes our position. It gives teeth to our concerns. And it's what so many people ask for. It may not be perfect, but it's what folk ask for. And I'm excited about voting for this tonight, finally. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yield back.
Any other comments? All right. We will now, we have some motions for our consideration regarding this. We have two motions, and I'm now ready to entertain motion number one, which is to adopt an ordinance amending the Durham Unified Development Ordinance incorporating revisions to Article 7, Design Standards, Article 8, Environmental Protection, Article 9, Landscaping and Buffering, and Article 13, additional requirements for subdivisions effective October 1, 2023.
So move.
It's been moved by Councilman Williams and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. If you will open the vote.
Madam Mayor, I just want to clarify that we're not having a technical. Okay, all right. Mine was saying something funky on the screen. Thank you.
Everybody able to vote? If you will close the vote and report out.
The motion passes 6-0.
The second motion for our consideration on this item is to adopt the appropriate consistency statement as required per NCGS 160D-605.
Move.
Second.
Been moved by Councilman Williams, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Madam Clerk, if you will open the vote. And if you will close the vote and report out.
The second motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you. Good first step. We now turn to item 22, which is also a zoning public hearing, which is the Consolidated Annexation 1102 and 1034 South Miami Boulevard. This public hearing is a zoning case, and we are now ready to receive our staff report.
Hey, good evening. Thank you, Mayor O'Neill, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, honorable council members. Alexander Cahill with the Planning Department. We received a request for utility extension agreement, a voluntary annexation, and an initial zoning map change from Thomas Johnson of Williams Mullen on behalf of his client, J.P. Highland. This is for two parcels of land totaling 27 acres and located at 1102 and 1034 South Miami Boulevard. This annexation petition is for a non-contiguous expansion of the primary corporate limits. The current zoning on the site is residential suburban 20 and commercial center. The applicant is proposing to change this designation to residential suburban multifamily with a development plan to allow up to 350 multifamily units, with at least 10% of the units being designated as affordable. This request, case Z2212, received a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission on May 9th, 2023, by a vote of 8-0. Staff would like to note one correction for the record on this project. The development plan and zoning map change zoning staff report state that no open space is required. However, the UDO does require 18% open space for the residential suburban multifamily district. As such, if this project were approved, an updated development plan that commits to 18% open space will be required to be submitted to the Planning Department prior to approval. As a reminder, 3 motions are required for this application. The first is to authorize the city manager to enter into utility extension agreement and approve the annexation. The second is to approve the zoning ordinance. And the third is to approve the consistency statement. Staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've heard the report from staff, and I'm now going to declare this public hearing open. First, are there any questions for staff from members of the council? Looking to my right first. Ladies, any questions? Left, colleagues, any questions? All right. I have Mr. Tom Johnson, who's the applicant, who will come and speak with us first. We do have two persons here in the audience. I would take it as speaking as proponents, Ms. Williams and, opponents, Ms. Williams and Ms. Stanback. Would that be correct? All right. All right, Mr. Johnson, we'll start y'all with 6 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
I shouldn't need the whole 6 minutes, but.
Okay, well, you have two speakers, so the time is kind of evenly divided, so 6
I understand.
6.
And I may reserve time if I need to speak to something that they bring up. As was mentioned, I'm Tom Johnson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Williams Mullen at 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1700 in Raleigh. Here on behalf of the applicant, as staff indicated, we should have had 18% open space on the plat and development plan, and we didn't, and we were fine to make that correction. We will definitely do that. This is to request to be able to develop up to 350 apartment units on this location, with 10% of those, at least 10% being affordable as defined in the ordinance. We are providing additional right-of-way along the frontage on Highway 70, 50 feet of right-of-way, providing over the amount of tree saved, 29% versus 20%. And the riparian buffers on at least one of the streams that's in the area, in addition to the 100 feet, there's an additional 50 feet because of a gas easement. So we have additional protection of the stream that's on the site. Do encourage, the other thing is staff has been very supportive of this project, as has the Planning Commission, in unanimously recommending it. I'm glad to answer any questions you may have about the project, but this is, again, an opportunity to provide for additional housing in Durham that Durham so sorely needs.
Let's start on this here.
Hi, thank you so much. I just wanted to know, am I good? No, sorry. I always forget about this mic. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to know your level of involvement with the community around this project.
Level of involvement with the community. We had, we had neighborhood meetings and have reached out to the community. We did not have many folks show up for the neighborhood meeting, despite reaching out. A couple of folks, the salvage yard that was across the street from, or is across the street from this project, they showed up, but they were just curious about the improvement to Highway 70 that's obviously currently under discussion. That's the only questions they had, but we didn't have anybody else show up that had any questions or concerns.
And I might have missed it when I was reading over the document, but is it 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms? I know the apartments, but.
It's a mixture.
A mixture.
A mixture of units.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. You said that at least 10% affordable housing?
Yes.
So that means there's a possibility for more. Is that what you're implying?
No, I didn't mean to imply that, but we're doing the 10%.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
That's the way the condition reads, is at least 10. So
I just like the word at least. That means there's hope.
Right, understood.
Any questions to my right? All right. You have some minutes you'd like to reserve. You have about 4 minutes left. Okay, we'll turn now to Ms. Williams and Ms. Stanback, and you will each have 3 minutes apiece.
Good afternoon. My name is Pam Williams. My address is on record. I'm an opponent of this development primarily due to the high volume of traffic congestion, and safety on US 70. US 70 is already over capacity for a level of service D at 114%, with over 45,500 average annual daily traffic. Just 4 developments that are approved or proposed in this immediate area are shown on the map. Fox Crossing, Cortez, Anja Avenue, and Micah Ridge, and would generate 9,500 daily traffic. And this is per their traffic studies, increasing traffic to over 55,000 vehicles per day and put US 70 at over 134% capacity. This does not even include the approved developments down Mineral Springs, Holder Road, and many others in southeast Durham. This development will be available by cars only, no transit, and only access to US 70. I want to point out that I know we may be in a housing crisis today, but we have approved, and just in southeast Durham alone, 22% of the 60,000 dwellings needed by 2050. So if that 22% is built, in which a huge percentage of them are under construction, I think our housing crisis will be over and we may be overbuilt. That's in Pam's opinion. Okay, so my question is, why are we considering more approval that will cause our infrastructure to fail and widen the gap? I also want to note that there is a study on US 70 ongoing right now by the MPO, Durham's MPO, and paid for by the city to relieve traffic congestion. In my opinion, based on 40 years as NCDOT engineer for transportation and major projects in Durham and Wake County, I don't believe this is going to work. And I say this based on a study, a traffic analysis study that was done in 2018 on a 4-lane expressway for 2040. It failed on a 4-lane expressway, which will hold more cars than a boulevard, failed. Based on the analysis results, 11 out of the 12 intersections are expected to fail over a level of service F. Also, NCDOT studied a 6-lane expressway with U-turn concepts, just like they did on the 4, that will result in U-turns exceeding 1,000 vehicles at peak hour at some locations having to take a U-turn. That is why NCDOT in 2018, along with the merger team, which also included the MPO at that time, decided to study a freeway.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, and council members. I'm Donna Stainback, Durham, North Carolina. I'd like to talk about this project's some adjustments, some requests for the following. This project borders Little Lick Creek on the south and a tributary at the north. So it's got, you know, some ecological problems or opportunities, as we should say, in and of itself. But we do need to look at providing the 30-foot boundary buffer with a 0.6 opacity. That's request. A 10-foot non-grading setback along the property line. That's what we were just discussing. It really is needed in these areas. 70% impervious soil is too high along Little Lick Creek. I'd like to request less than 70%. There's no space left for commercial residential development along this corridor. It is only going to crowd out any commercial options and add traffic on this highway that Pam just discussed. We need to look at an access stub in the rear of this parcel to connect with Cortez development. Also worth noting, and I have a concern about a project this big, is there's no, or large, no open space designation. And that you need to have that with apartments. And there is no proffer for the 168 students. Right now, they're looking at Bethesda Elementary School, which is like 117% overextended at this time. And so with all this new development, we're going to be in serious problems with the school systems. So, thank you.
Mr. Johnson, you have time for rebuttal, sir.
Good. So Alex,
Thank you. I mean, in terms of traffic, obviously, this is an active project that is under active review for improvement. So we know that, and we knew that coming in to the project. But in reality, the current zoning, having some commercial designated, we're actually downzoning some of it, which will actually decrease the potential traffic there could be right now with the current zoning that exists on the property. This is development in a watershed, and so we're having to meet the more stricter rules in terms of impervious and managing our stormwater with respect to the fact this being a watershed area. So we know that and knew that from the beginning, and we'll be doing that. But I say as before that we're exceeding the tree save area that's required by almost 10%, 29% versus 20%. And obviously we will manage our stormwater and be under strict controls in terms of any erosion and sedimentation control during construction. I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
All right. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
I believe those are all the persons who have signed up to speak. We had no speakers on the internet that desired to speak on this item, and so at this point, I will declare that this public hearing is closed and this matter is back before council. I'm sorry, we have someone?
Madam Mayor, Mr. Hefner had his hand raised, but he put it down.
It's
He
down
put it
now?
back up. Put it back up.
All right, Mr. Hefner? Mr. Hefner, did you want to be heard as to item 22?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to first off say that the reason that there was very little public comment for this project is because they didn't notify any of the residents in this area. They may have sent out notifications to some of the businesses that border the property, but this neighborhood is in a close proximity, and nobody in this neighborhood got any notification whatever. So that's why there was so little engagement. I'm opposed to this for the same reasons already stated by the two ladies. It's not just traffic. It's not just schools. It's most of the infrastructure in this area. It can't handle what has been proposed, what is being built, what is being set up for development. There's like a dozen large-scale developments within a couple-mile radius of this area, and we just can't handle all that. It's just too many people, too many cars. You've got to put the infrastructure in first. You got the cart before the horse. I'm all for affordable housing, and since it's apartments, it'll probably have more affordable housing than some of the others like Cortez. But you can't just shove things in and hope for the best. You have to have the infrastructure in place. And I think all of the local residents have that same concern, that over the next 5 or 10 years, we're just going to see our level of happiness and loving our community just disappear, because it's just too much, too fast, too heavy, too concentrated. I mean, I understand, we have to prepare for growth, but it's got to be managed. You can't just start sticking stuff in and hope for the best. And the other thing is, they're underselling the amount of natural area and the streams, the wetlands, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This property and the Cortez property adjoining could be developed together as a unit where they could save a lot of the habitat and the trees, the streams, etc. This is an opportunity. You could send it back to the Planning Commission and let them put together something that would.
Mr. Hefner, if you
yes,
would,
ma'am.
if you would finish your last sentence, sir, your time is expired.
Okay. Like I said, this is too much, too soon, and I oppose it.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, you likewise will have 3 minutes for rebuttal, sir.
I'd just like to briefly say, I mean, we sent the notices out for the neighborhood meeting in compliance with the city's ordinance. So it went to the folks within the radius that we were supposed to notify. So I did want to make that clarification. And in terms of infrastructure, I mean, this project actually will help a lot of that infrastructure. There's a sewer extension that's going next to it. That's part of your vote here tonight in terms of that agreement. And again, it's contributing right of way toward the improvement of Highway 70. If there are any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any other questions, colleagues? Councilwoman Holsey-Hymen.
Just again, just the question I asked earlier about the community involvement, and then the gentleman was saying that they were like notices sent out, but you're saying they were notices. I just want some clarity on that.
Yeah, they were sent out, we had to send those out to the list for the residents with the appropriate radius as required by the ordinance, which is what we did.
So one time sent out?
Correct, for the neighborhood meeting that we had.
Thank you.
And of course, there were notices sent out. I mean, had the Planning Commission meeting as well as this meeting as well.
Any other comments, council? Questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the Planning Commission got this one right, so I'll be supporting this project tonight. I appreciate the 10% dedication of affordable housing. I also do appreciate the improvements as well. Entrances and additional lanes. I will say, I live in this neighborhood. I mean, I make that turn from Miami onto 70 every day, and I'm watching the traffic growing. And one of the things I had to learn when I went from private citizen to this is that capacity is not measured by my comfort. Because I'm in traffic does not mean that the road can't handle the traffic. I mean, there are certain times when traffic is heavier. United States Route 70 is not about to fail. It's uncomfortable at times, but United States Route 70 is not about to fail. And if it's true for this project, then it has to be true for every single one that comes after it. And I've said time and time again, I think it is impractical, I think it's illegal, and I think it's ill-advised to engage in a moratorium, whether stated or de facto. And if we say we're not going to do anything else here until infrastructure comes or until whatever the measure is when we can start rebuilding again, no one's identified that for me. I think it's a slippery slope. I think the Planning Commission got this one right. I urge support of this project. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilman Williams.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mayor Pro Tem sort of touched on it. What's more costly than housing is infrastructure. So a lot of times when we're building infrastructure, and I sit on the MPO with Councilmember Caballero and alternate Councilmember Holsey-Hymen, the mayor sits on Go Triangle. One thing that I have learned since being on those boards is that it is ridiculously expensive, and we can't handle it alone. We can't handle it by ourselves. So a lot of times what we do, actually every time, we have to do another study, because you have to have a study in place to receive federal funding and support. North Carolina General Assembly just doesn't really get involved. Wish they would. So it's really between us here at the local level and then at the federal level. The federal level does not fund what's convenient, they fund what's necessary. So in order for us to be able to get funding support for bus rapid transit or just multiple modes of transit, whether it's rail or other modes, we have to have the density in order for them to make it make sense. So we do have to grow into what may be a little uncomfortable for us up to a certain point before it makes sense for the federal government to even match us, or some formulas are 80-20, some are 50-50, or for them to even get involved. And that's sort of where we are. So I hear you, what you all are saying, and trust me, I've been on Ellis Road at 5 o'clock. It's not a good place to be, but when it gets to that point, that's when we have the rationale to bring in more support for us to have funding support at the federal level for us to have other modes of transportation, to have other options to get around. So thank you for that concern that was shared. But that's why we are dealing with the infrastructure issue.
Any other comments, Samara? All right. I think we have heard from all speakers, and I will now declare the public hearing to be closed. And we have 3 motions for our consideration. Motion number 1 is to adopt an ordinance annexing 1102 and 1034 South Miami Boulevard into the city of Durham effective September 30th, and to authorize the city manager to enter into a utility extension agreement with BPC NC Miami Durham LLC.
So moved.
Second.
And moved by by Councilman Williams.
The motion passes 5-1 with Councilmember Holsey-Hymen voting no.
The second motion for our consideration is to adopt an ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance by taking property out of the residential suburban -20 and commercial center / Jordan District B county jurisdiction and establishing the same as residential suburban multifamily with a development plan / Jordan District B city jurisdiction.
So moved.
Read.
It's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilman Williams. Madam Clerk, if you will open the vote. If you would close the vote and report out.
The motion passes 5-1. Again, Councilmember Holsey-Hymen voting no.
The third and final motion for this item is to adopt a consistency statement as required by NCGS 160D-605.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Councilman Williams, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Madam Clerk, if you will open the vote. If you will close the vote and report out.
And the motion passes 6-0.
All right. We now turn to item 23, which is a zoning map change. Well, actually, you know what we're gonna do, everybody? Before we start this, we're gonna go ahead and take our break and come back in at 9, okay? So we'll take our break for about 10 minutes and we'll come back in at 9 so we can go straight through.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, we'll stand in recess for 10 minutes.
We're proud to say that we'll once again join the rest of the country in celebrating Welcoming Week from September 8th to the 17th. The week is a time to bring together neighbors from all backgrounds, including immigrants and non-immigrants, to build strong connections and recognize the importance of creating welcoming and inclusive communities for all. As part of the celebrations, our Neighborhood Improvement Services team will host several activities. These include an artistic cultural fair on September 8th, an immigrant and refugee career and resource fair on September 11th, and a Neighbors and Flavors event on September 13th to celebrate tastes from around the world that can be found at local restaurants. In addition, 4 immigrants and refugees will share their stories during a panel discussion on September 14th, and an international soccer game will be held on September 17th. All events are free, but some require advanced registration. More information can be found at durhamcommunityengagement.org/welcoming_week.
So, John, for people who've been living under a rock, what is Bike Durham?
Recording stopped.
Who is Bike Durham?
Yeah, Bike Durham is a local nonprofit advocacy organization working for safe, affordable, and sustainable transportation for everyone here in Durham, regardless of who they are or where they live. It was started 10 years ago by a group of neighbors, residents here in Durham, and the name comes from their interests at that time were really around moving around the city safely on bikes. But in about 2019, we made a shift under the leadership of the board at that time to broaden the mission to really be about walking, biking, and transit use.
Everyone in Durham should be able to find a home they can afford. That's why Forever Home Durham is creating affordable, livable, and inclusive communities for low to middle income residents. From renting to owning, find out how the city is helping more people find homes right here in Durham. Learn more at foreverhomedurham.com.
This is what I get for giving Brooke the night off. Is it not working? No.
All right, it's 9:01 and we are ready to get started. We will now call for item 23, which is the zoning map change at 301 Infinity Road. This public hearing is a zoning case, and we will receive our staff report.
Great, thank you, Mayor O'Neill. A request for a zoning map change and a utility extension agreement was received from Jeremy Anderson of Thomas and Hutton. This is for 2 parcels of land totaling around 18.1 acres and located at 301 and 401 Infinity Road. The current zoning is residential suburban 20. The applicant proposes to change this designation to Planned Development Residential 7.203 and Office and Institutional with a development plan. This rezoning is to facilitate the construction of up to 99 townhouse units and a 5,000 square foot office building. This request, case Z220006, received a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission on May 9th, 2023 by a vote of 5-3. As a reminder, 3 motions are required for this application. The first is to authorize the city manager to enter into a utility extension agreement. The second is to approve the zoning ordinance. And the third is to approve the consistency statement. Staff and the applicant team are available to answer any questions this evening.
Thank you. You have heard the report from staff, and I am now going to declare this public hearing open. First, are there any questions for staff from members of the council? Looking to my right first. Seeing none. Looking to my left. All righty. We have a number of speakers signed up to speak to this item, but we will start first with our applicants, and we will have 2 persons who will be speaking on behalf of the applicant, I believe. Attorney Jamie Spindler and Attorney Jeremy Anderson. We'll start y'all with 5 minutes apiece.
That's plenty, and Jeremy's with Thomas and Hutton, but I'll be beginning the presentation and then he'll resume it. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant. I'm joined by Jeremy Anderson, a landscape architect with Thomas and Hutton, who will be available to answer technical questions and the process that this project entailed. So this mixed-use infill project will add additional density and office space to support transit use, and together with offered contributions to the affordable housing and school funds for the city of Durham, puts the right type of infill in the right location that's consistent with your new draft place type map. This is small-scale infill. This is giving the ability of additional housing units in an area that needs them without creating additional sprawl and without putting a significant amount of intensity on the existing infrastructure, but also offsetting that infrastructure needs with designated transportation commitments. So the request is to rezone 2 undeveloped parcels on Infinity Road, close to its intersection with North Roxborough there, totaling about 18 acres. The property is currently vacant and has been been for some time because it has significant challenges in terms of a large stream buffer and some existing rock that makes it difficult for development. Properties adjacent are largely rural residential areas and kind of an older residential development, but along Roxborough is a significant amount of existing commercial infrastructure, transit infrastructure, and transportation facilities that support a great deal of shopping and commercial activity in this area. It's also very close to several parks and recreational facilities, including the Eno River, the River Forest Park, the Old Farm Road Park, as well as several schools that are in walking distance. As staff mentioned, it's also close to the commercial uses along Roxborough, and existing transit bus line runs along North Roxborough Road. It's consistent with the place type map designation that's currently winding its way through your system. Most of the property is in the transit overlay district, which is shown, or transit opportunity area, excuse me, that's shown in the purple there. This encourages a mix of housing, including apartments, townhomes, designed in a way that's compact and a way to minimize impacts on adjacent neighborhoods. A smaller portion shown there in the brown is the mixed residential neighborhood that allows for small scale commercial and institutional uses. And as a result, our request is going to be a mix of PDR on the residential portion that's consistent with your transit designation on the place type map, and then an OI office and institutional on the pink smaller portion that was designated that mixed use, that looks for that community service, kind of community level of amenities for the area. And what that does is allow us to build up to 99 townhomes on the PDR section and about 5,000 square feet of office, so a small dental or other type of local services office. In addition to that mix being consistent with your place type map, there's a key commitments that we've made to the plan, up to 99 townhomes and 5,000 square feet of office. So aligned along that kind of very narrow, challenging area would be the townhomes, and then the office off to the side. In addition, although the level of transportation and traffic impacts did not trigger a TIA, there are transportation commitments as seen on the screen, constructing eastbound turn lanes, constructing two-way left turn lanes along Infinity Road, the additional 5-foot paved of bikeway along Infinity Road that could be a shared path at the staff's option, and dedication of right-of-way to facilitate a future NCOD project that's currently in design and has been making its way through the system for some time, and we're happy to answer additional questions on that. We also are offering a contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund of $65,000, and that equates to about $650 per unit, in addition to a school contribution fund of $15,000, which generates, according to the staff report, there's only 26 students that would be generated from this development, so that works out to about $575 per pupil, so significant contributions. And while I know that this council has wanted to see more and more units come to fruition, the place that really can be delivered is in apartments or areas where you have the density, the amount of volume to offset. Cases like the one before us that had 350 apartments. This is not that case. This is a small scale, 99 townhomes that's putting the right type of infill in the right place according to where your comprehensive plan is going. And so not all projects can have units, but where they don't, they have a great incentive to proffer these monetary contributions, and that's what we've done in this case. As a result, the rezoning is consistent with the draft comprehensive plan and the place type map, many of the policies that the staff noted on the screen, and I'd like Jeremy to address how those commitments play out on the development plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yes, if you need more than 5 minutes, you may go ahead. I think we have about
No, I won't.
10, 15 people on the
Okay, thank you.
So,
Jeremy Anderson, landscape architect with Thomas and Hutton. Yeah, I'll just touch on this one slide a little more on the technical side of things, the site-specific. I did want to make one clarification. Alexander mentioned the utility extension agreement. I think the confusion was at one point it was asked for by the engineering department. We actually paid for it and then realized it wasn't required. So if I failed to noted that in the report, but I don't believe that's required. There's utility extensions along Infinity, or existing utilities on Infinity. So just want to make that clarification. Specific to the site here, you can see we're turned 90 degrees from what you saw on the previous slide, with Infinity Road being on the right side. Just touching on those road improvements, as Jamie mentioned, a TIA was not required, but we know traffic is concerned on Infinity Road, so we're proposing 2 access points, one for the residential portion on the lower part of the screen and one for the office. There is a 100-foot stream buffer and floodplain and floodway dividing these 2 parcels, so we're not connecting those with a driveway or a road, thus they'll have separate road connections via driveways to Infinity, and then that widening will span the distance between those driveways, so we'll have a 3-lane section from driveway to driveway and then the appropriate tapers. The NCDOT TIP project that was mentioned that is in engineering stage right now, you can see the little orange wedge at the bottom corner of the site. That is the right-of-way dedication that would be for that NCDOT project should it go forward. So we're making that right-of-way reservation so that can happen. I mentioned the stream buffer through the middle of the site there. Again, 100 foot, so it's one of the larger stream buffers that'll be protected as required. I do want to mention, as tree save and development's a hot topic this evening, the residential portion's required to save 20% of the trees. The quick math on the stream buffer and the floodplain is approximately 30% of the site. So although our commitment is 20%, I know was mentioned earlier, specific to this project, that we're basically saving the trees we're required to. That is true, but that's 30% of the site. So that's these pretty significant acreage of the parcel. And it's a relatively narrow parcel already. So you can see it takes a narrow parcel, makes it a little narrower, but we can make the best with it there. So just wanted to point that out, that we'll probably end up be closer to 30, actually a little bit in excess of 30% tree save when done. And then as we get further into the site, you see the arrows, the two-way directional arrows, both to the north, east, and west. So those are future cross-access stubs. So should development happen in any direction, the public road would be connected and we'll have some interconnectivity. So all traffic wouldn't have to be routed back out to Infinity Road. With that, I think I will close my presentation and be available for questions.
Any questions for the applicants? Council? Thank you, and you will have plenty of time for rebuttal. Ladies and gentlemen who have signed up to speak to this to this item, I'm going to call you up at 5 persons at a time. We have about 15 to 18 people signed up, including both. I'm supposed to try to balance the two, so in an effort, it's kind of hard to do that. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you could do 2 minutes instead of 3 so that we're a little bit closer in to trying to balance the time, I'd appreciate it. And so we'll start first with Mr. Carl Shimelinsky, followed by Jeff Stuckey, Samantha Boyd, Aaron Haverson, and Manetta Hood. Those will be the first 5 folks I will call.
David were in a group. Can we, without blowing everything up, could you get to the mic, please, sir?
Yes, if you'd like to go follow each other,
yeah,
that's fine if you just state your name.
Okay.
All right.
Go first. Is that acceptable?
That's fine if you just, I'll pull out the cards as you call your name. That's fine.
Okay. Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members, cutting us down to 2 minutes. You're going to miss the choreography, but that's okay. I think some people were called away by life for other things. I have a number of questions on the 301 Infinity project, and I want to use my 2 minutes to talk about some of the things that came up at the May 9th meeting and reactions to some of those. I think last time it was mentioned that housing should be placed in this area because it is close to existing infrastructure. Right now, there are no bike lanes, there are no sidewalks, there's not a scheduled bus route on Infinity. It's bad traffic. One day we lost a fire hydrant at Infinity in North Roxborough because a truck clipped it. I'm not seeing the infrastructure. I'm encouraged by the 30% of saving of trees, but we've heard about canopies, we've heard about runoff. We haven't heard about climbing. You can put a 2-year-old tree, plant that somewhere, and an 8-year-old can't climb it. I'm past my age of being able to climb trees, but I can use 2 sturdy ones to hang a hammock on and sleep. The aged trees and mature trees deserve to be kept. Traffic is an issue and will continue to be. And from the meeting on May 9th, it appears that the data from COVID years was used as a traffic count. Before COVID, around 2018, there was almost 8,500 cars a day going through. There was a measurement in 20 or 21, about 6,600. And those cars are increasing. And I wish there's a way that y'all could use the most current information, even if it isn't legally required. It is Generosity Month, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Am I out of time already? Oh my gosh. Tithing. 100 units, 400,000 apiece, approximately average. Times that's $40 million. Let's supply $4 million to affordable housing in Durham.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm David Wiley. I'm card number 2, 4911 Stevens Lane in Durham. My concern is about traffic, specifically the added pressure this will provide for the already stressed intersection of Infinity at Roxborough. NCDOT has approved an intersection improvement plan, U5516, in 2014. The construction is delayed until 2027 for that plan. The applicant for 301 Infinity, in conjunction with another applicant whose proposal is still in review, have both dutifully provided request. My question is to the members of the council. After 13 years of delay for this intersection improvement project, how can you interface with NCDOT differently so that there are no further delays for this important infrastructure improvement project? My request is for the applicant. A challenge for us with traffic in that area is the east-west traversal of the Infinity at Roxborough intersection. And this is due to the traffic signal timing, which heavily favors the north-south traffic through that intersection for obvious reasons. Would the applicant commit to working with city staff to change the light timing of the intersection to accommodate the 99 units in Parcel B and the commercial development in Parcel A prior to beginning development? Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening in your comments.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and staff. My name's Tom Berry. I'm card number 3. And I'm here tonight to talk about Project 301 Infinity Road. I've heard a lot tonight about trees and runoff, and I'm here to talk about the soil. In looking at the Durham County taxation map, there are 3 types of soil listed, and I looked online and found the USDA web soil survey ratings for these soils, and all 3 are listed as very limited within the engineering dwellings without basements category. And that's what they're looking to build on this. And that means that the soil has 1 or more features that are unfavorable for specified use. The limitations generally cannot be overcome without major reclamation, special design, or expensive installation procedures. Madam Mayor and Council and staff, I come to you tonight to request one thing, and that's a geological study before there's a vote on this tonight, because I think we owe it to ourselves and the community around this, so that we don't end up with another project that's right beside this. And if our staff would put up the slide, attachment B in your paperwork.
You can continue talking if you'd like, sir, so.
I'm sorry?
Hold his time for us. Hold up right here for you.
Okay. Can you guys, it's the parcel, the one that's happened before us, is the one that's going to be up to the right that looks like it's already been cleared. That property was approved in 2002 for 44 condos, townhouses. It was graded strip clear basically in 2007. Nothing's been done. So we just don't want to see this done again. So we're asking for that geological study so you can come in and let us know.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Your time tonight.
My name's Carl Shimoleski, 4917 Stevens Lane. I'm number 4, or the cleanup person for our group. All right. I don't know how many remember, at one time we were called the City of Trees. I don't think we are anymore, are we? No. That's all I'm going to say about trees, because you've heard it enough. Affordable housing. I have to agree with Tom. My question is, to the developers, instead of money, why not make a unit or two for developable housing, affordable housing? Everybody else is. The money's great, but affordable housing is what we need. Tom's geological survey. You can't get a full picture of what's going on. You've got the surveys for endangered species, trees, water runoff surveys, but you don't have a geological survey. And I think you really need one to see what's underneath that dirt. Basically rocks. Basically blasting. Something to think about. The bigger picture, and I have to agree with Tom, is traffic. And I'm going to expand a little bit more. The 301, 401's coming, but also the bigger one, the Infinity Roxborough, with 850 townhomes and 27,000 square feet of office space, is also going to come in on that Roxborough, Infinity, and Lotta Road traffic light. And right now, it's not bad, but wait a minute, let's add in Northern High School, which is now past that. So there's a lot of traffic's going to come there. So I'm urging you, can you go to the DOT and try to put the infrastructure in? And then, you know, I'm kind of at this point, can we vote no? Let's get the infrastructure in place, and I'm done.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Samantha Boyd. I thank you for this opportunity to speak. My concern is, it's not the traffic light. Our only way would be cut off for us to get out of our neighborhood on Infinity. We can't make it to the light. You build those homes, they have the right of way to go to the right and everything. And also this, have any of y'all been and seen what it looks like in that area? Turn right on Omega, left on High Meadow, and get ready to try to turn on Infinity. Has anyone personally experienced what we will have to be condemned to get out of our neighborhood? And also, I have personal experience with this low income. I have a niece that lost her apartment because developers developed and took their home. They get a voucher for $1,300. They can't find an apartment around that price. You have to make 4 times as much. That means almost $50,000 a year. I'm 62 years old. I barely make 35. And you can't pay the extra with that voucher. If you find one for $1,400 or $1,500, you cannot pay that $100 or $200 more to get that apartment. So low income, please vote no. I know if you're not involved, if it's not affecting you, it's hard to see. And also this looks good on paper, but there is no school in walking distance from Infinity. Even Northern, you have to cross across a bridge. There's no sidewalk there. You're in the street. You depend on that white piece to keep you safe to get to Northern. That's not walking distance. The middle schools and other high schools, they are not walking distance. And the bus stops at 6, so we don't have transportation. It stops at 6 o'clock in the evening. So basically my concern, yes, is traffic, being trapped in my neighborhood. Yes, I know we're tired of hearing about the trees, but isn't that why they're moving down here? Because of the scenery and the calmness of life that we have? What would our life quality be like? You put a lot of people in a tight space, you're gonna have people, there's gonna be a lot of friction. So please vote no. Like they say, let's research, and we need the infrastructure. We need a way to get out. We need before they even start building. Because right now, when you turn on the corner of Omega and Infinity, the trucks have already eroded that corner.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd.
Thank you.
Ms. Evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and the other members of the council. My name is Aaron Halverson, and I also live on Omega Road, as Ms. Boyd just also spoke on. You've already heard a lot about traffic and a lot about the concerns that we brought tonight. I just want to, I'm the current president of our neighborhood association of the River Forest community. That's just across from these developments, and I just want to be in public support of the people that already spoke and say that we are concerned about safely being able to enter and leave our neighborhood with all these extra developments being placed. And so we just request these considerations be made when you're making your decision. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. We now will call Mr. Jeff Sturkey, Samantha. Okay. Samantha Boyd, great. We have a couple of cards for y'all. Minetta Hood. Okay. Mrs. Sturkey filled out another one. Ms. Barefoot. No. Yeah, some of you all did, but that's okay. Ms. Robin Barefoot. Ms. Katie Ross. Okay. All right, ladies. And then we have Linda Warren and Mr. Harrison. You spoke earlier, okay. And then we have a couple of people on the internet. So we have Ms. Barefoot, Ms. Ross, and Ms. Warren. All right.
Hey, how are y'all tonight? Robin Barefoot. I live in North Durham. I live close to this intersection, but further north. I've told you all before that I am a plaintiff in a lawsuit against Durham County for its interpretation and misinterpretation of conservation subdivisions. And as a result of that, there is a subdivision a mile away from my home on Preston Andrews. It's called Mason Farms. And our neighborhood is concerned about what's going to happen when that property is developed. Development has not started yet. And so we have been doing research regarding how we can protect ourselves from blasting if in fact blasting occurs. And so last week I got a certificate degree in wells and well inspection. I made a number of phone calls to a variety of well contractors, some of whom I know, some of whom I know better now. In fact, today I had my well inspected. I had what's called a point of sale inspection of my well, which cost me $600. It was a testing to make sure that the well pump was functioning. It was to make sure that the pressure in the pressure tank was adequate. They did some measuring, and then they also took water samples. They did not open the well. They did not drain the well. They did not take camera video of the inside of the casing. If I were to do that to make sure that my well is intact, that would cost me about $1,800. And the thing about well pumps is if you pull a well pump out of a well and then you put the contractor's well pump in order to do that yield test and in order to do that camera work to inspect the inside of the well. When you put the original pump back in, sometimes it won't work. Have you ever had that thing where you take out a light bulb and you put the light bulb back in and then it won't work anymore? You know, you're not really sure why. Well, that's what can happen to a well pump. So I've already run out of time. That's terrible. I'm going to just close by saying these developments are devastating our community, and I really hope that we take a pause on this and say no. Thank you so much.
Hello, Katie Ross, Bahama. So I echo a lot of what has been said here. I also live further north than Infinity Road. One point that was made earlier was about the geological report that should be made on this project before they start clearing, before they grade, before they do any of that. And I wanted to follow up with that, just an idea that I have been thinking about, and I don't know why it isn't already done, and that is when one of the problems that's been in the media for people that have suffered, the neighbors of blasting, their wells have collapsed, their foundations have been cracked, they're left with huge expenses, and they're left with developers and blasting companies that are denying liability. But it's also the case that there's apparently been violations of the blasting permits, and people don't know where to go. There's not, maybe they go to the fire marshal, maybe they usually call the planning department first. So I just don't understand why it's not an implicit condition of every approval of development that comes out of the city or the county, that the developers must comply with all of the conditions of every permit they get, especially these very dangerous ones of blasting, and that if they don't, the planning department can shut them down. It shouldn't be on the neighbors and the people that are damaged to have to go through this maze of where do I find out what was permitted? Where do I find out whether they followed the violations? There's cases where seismographs have been put down and the neighbors are not told even what the readings are. That even if it was their property that the seismograph was put on. So I just, as I told you, I'm kind of thinking along the lines of kind of enforcement, and that's just something that wouldn't cost anything, but it would put the burden where it should be, which on the people that are doing these developments and making the money from it, and not on the neighbors that are damaged. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Warren?
Good evening. My name is Linda Warren, and I am in my favorite community in Durham, and that is River Forest. I'm back in River Forest. I was originally there back in the 70s and moved back to River Forest on Infinity a little over 20 years ago. Couple of things. I did not come prepared to speak until I got here and realized that I really needed to say my piece. I just visited my son in Texas, and they live in a little town outside of Austin called Pflugerville, and next door to Pflugerville is Round Rock. And did you guys know that they have an ordinance in Round Rock? You cannot cut down a tree for nothing. I don't care what you're building, what you come from, you cannot cut down trees. And I saw so many houses and apartments built around trees. Now, of course, I call them little shrubs because they're not tall like our wonderful trees, but anyway, that's a different story. But they have an ordinance. I have one other thing that I wanted to say, and one is I take issue with our neighborhood being considered a neighborhood that can handle what they call a small or little housing development. In my neighborhood, 99 townhomes is not small, because we are, as was said before, we are bound by only one way out of my neighborhood. And because I live on Infinity, I get hung up in my driveway lots of times, and that light does not help me at all. The other thing I want to say is that if we are truly going to be talking about infrastructure, I would suggest, as it has been suggested before, that every new housing development that comes to this county must require a certain percentage of those housing units to be for affordable housing, not making very insignificant donation to the affordable housing community.
Thank you. I believe I have called all of the names for persons who are in person to speak to us, and we will now turn to the internet and go through those names of persons who have signed up to speak to us via computer. Andra Hutton is not here, according to our clerk. Tom Berry. You signed up a couple of ways, Mr. Berry. Okay. Robert Moore Sr. And I do believe we have one hand raised from Jill Franks. Ms. Franks?
Fransky, yes.
Fransky? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
You have 2 minutes, ma'am, if you'd like to
Okay,
speak
thank
to
you.
this item.
Yes, thank you. I live off of Infinity on Kenwood, and in my front yard is the drainage for two different sides of the neighborhood. This is the boulders that line the drainage, which are two streams that come from the neighborhoods, are from pyroclastic flows. These are huge boulders. They're all through the neighborhood. It's what lines the Eno River. It's all over here. If they don't do some kind of geo studies, we're going to have probably the same thing, land cleared and nobody can build on it. My second point is, even though I am not a traffic expert, I did come from California and I drove through the Santa Monica Freeway to work for 17 years. So I do consider myself somewhat of an expert. The traffic in Durham is nothing like California. However, I have to say that the intersection with Roxborough and Infinity is very close to many intersections in Los Angeles. I have waited with my grandchildren for 5, 7, one time it was 10 minutes to get from Infinity to Roxborough in the morning. It's the same way coming the other direction in the afternoon to the bus stop. People are driving through the small businesses on either side, either the northeast or the southeast sides. They drive through the businesses in order to get onto Infinity or onto Roxborough. The situation is getting worse this year. It's worse this year than it was last year. And the lady that was talking about the schools, they are not within walking distance. There's nothing within walking distance. People that are on the opposite side of this development will never be able to get onto Infinity. I see them every morning. They're waiting and waiting, and they have to depend on the kindness of strangers to let them onto Infinity in order to get to the intersection. This is, for traffic alone, this needs to be restudied. It's just not going to work.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we're ready for your rebuttal. At this time, I think you have at least.
I don't think I'll need too much time. I'll start, and I know some of these questions were more technical and are more appropriate for Jeremy to answer. But I think to the point of the traffic signal timing, that's a great suggestion and something that we can definitely work towards. And I think Jeremy's working on some language of that in terms of timing, working with the staff on timing the signal at Roxborough and Infinity. Of course, that would be subject to probably both DOT and city review, but it's something we're definitely willing to work towards. In terms of the traffic, we understand the concerns that are existing out that way. And I think the best answer we have is that these changes take time and they're incremental. And when you have something that's 99 townhomes and is a very short frontage on Infinity, there's only so much in the code that we can do to improve that section, but that's what we're doing. We're improving that section and making those commitments as suggested by your transportation staff. There is that larger project that was slated for DOT. It's hit some timing issues, but our understanding it was in design at one point, and there is that development to the west that's between this development and Infinity that is trying to work through those fixes. As the gentleman mentioned, that's a much larger and more intense and robust development, but I appreciate him acknowledging that the changes that need to be made are out of proportion for either project. We're much smaller, much less intense, but we're doing what we can to address those. Jeremy, do you want to speak to both the traffic timing and any survey and how that normally comes, of course?
Yeah, Jeremy Anderson, Thomas Nutton. As Jamie mentioned, that commitment to work with the city on the signal timing, we'll have to work on the language, but I think that's an absolutely fine commitment. We will make that. We can work on the language tonight or after the meeting. In terms of geotech and a soil study, I've just been kind of chatting with the client here to try to, he absolutely needs one. One has not been done yet. Because it requires some clearing to get on site, but he's committed to doing it. Whether we make a commitment that is done in a certain timing, or I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't strongly advise that they do their geotech and their borings as soon as possible on the site. So if you feel comfortable needing a commitment or a condition to stay that, we could get there, but I've advised you wouldn't proceed with too much further without getting that work done, so you know what you're dealing with. So,
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from, I'm sorry, we're not at the point yet. Let me close the public hearing and put it back forward. I think we have exhausted all of our speakers tonight, literally probably, but I think we have called all the cards. So at this point in time, I will now declare the public hearing to be closed and the matter is back before council. Councilman Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to, there were a few comments that were made. I just wanted to just sort of address. I'm very familiar with Pflugerville, and I'm glad they have their ordinance out there because they have no trees in Texas, and it's like Arizona, like you have to provide your own water because there is none. So definitely, and thanks for joining us on the, requiring affordable housing. Unfortunately, in North Carolina, we can't require it, so therefore we try to urge it. That's why I was saying earlier, I was like, did you say at least 10%? That means there's hope for more. Yeah, we can't force it, but we do try to encourage it. But definitely want to definitely hear want you to know we hear you. And what was your neighborhood? Stevenswood. Okay. All right. Thank you. No, the one that was having trouble getting out. River Forest. Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Caballero.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I think these are mostly for staff. So one's going to be for you, Bill, because it's traffic, yeah. Thank you. I can't remember, that project got pulled out of the STIP. I guess it was a STIP. And is it back in the STIP or no?
Yes, Bill Judge, Assistant Transportation Director. No, unfortunately, this project was in the draft STIP up until the very last version. And and so it got removed. So it is no longer in the recently adopted STIP. It is being resubmitted with Spot 7 as one of our top priorities. But currently there is no funding for the project.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. I remember that y'all were saying that it had been removed, but that maybe you didn't understand why now. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other question was around the geological study that was asked. And just was wondering, it seems like it's part of the process, but maybe not. And so I was just curious about, is it built in or not?
So
Sarah Young with the Planning Department. It is not something that is required for a planning approval. However, for construction, that is due diligence that they will need to do for a variety of things, including, building permits, including infrastructure, their construction drawings, so they will need to know that information prior to that.
Would it, I guess I hear their concern around whatever the project was next door that I guess cleared, where would it fall with the clear? I mean, do you understand my question? It's like, I wouldn't want that repeated, right? If there is the bedrock of rock that folks are, and the applicant said it themselves, that is a constraint on the site itself. So how do we avoid that?
So, and Mr. Anderson can probably chime in on this, but you don't need to clear the entire site to do a geotechnical analysis. Typically, they will take borings at different locations throughout the site. You do need to clear some area for the borings, but you don't necessarily need to clear the entirety of the site in order to do that. But Mr. Anderson, if you
Thank you.
differently or have different experience, please chime in.
No, yeah, you're correct. You need a path. The truck would need to clear a path to go in there and make those borings where we identified, and you would probably go through the whole site. The site next door, not sure exactly what happened, but they got obviously a lot further into their process. They might have had borings and said, we're proceeding, and then once they got on site, you find different things potentially. And at some point, they just stopped. I don't know the precise. Yeah, could you build this road and then I don't know. There's rock and different constraints can stop construction at different points. Doing just borings to identify where rock is, what type of rock it is, that's a 20-foot path through the site. That's what I would strongly advise this client do very soon. I don't know what a condition looks like because I don't want to put timing on it because I don't know what their schedule is to say they need to do it within 60 days. But as Sarah mentioned, I would strongly advise, and it's for foundation design, for road design, for stormwater design, you need adequate geotech and geostudies done. So,
Thank you. And then, Bill, this is another question for you. Sorry, and I could have asked this, so I apologize. When's the spot 7? Where are we in that again? I remember we just started swapping projects, I think, right?
Yeah, well, spot 7 will be the next round, so we're currently soliciting the project priorities. The MPO has 24 projects I think they can submit. So this will be one of the 24, highly likely. Surveys, I'm not sure if the survey's closed but the survey's out right now with the community, so it'll be coming back to the board very soon to finalize that list of projects.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Those are all my questions, Madam Mayor.
Any further questions of council?
I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Barry. He had his hand raised. Yeah, you wanted something? You're going to add something to that
No, I was just say the name of that abandoned development was Rocky Creek.
Rocking Creek.
Rocky Creek.
Thank you.
Like the Flying Squirrel Creek.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I want to thank members of the community that have come out tonight. This case for me kind of is a bellwether of where we're going and where we have to go as a city. That is about, and again, I said this earlier, if we are going to seriously have an urban growth boundary, then this is our future. Infill developments, dealing with more density within a footprint that we say we do not want to grow anymore. So on the one hand, we say we can't build on the perimeter because of environmental issues. Okay. Can't build in the inner city because of traffic or environmental issues. We're going to have to make some hard choices as a city, as a growing city, who is about to collectively say that we are going to cease our footprint growing. So all of these choices that this case is putting before us, we're going to have this over and over again, and some neighborhoods that heretofore have not been impacted by growth, you're going to be impacted. We can't have it both ways by having an urban growth boundary without growing the city's inner footprint. Again, I think although it was 5-3 vote, I think the Planning Commission got this one right. Infill development. I I think that the proffers are what we want to see, and I hope this sends a message to developers, particularly as we begin to get more dense, if we're going to honor our urban growth boundary. I pulled up the Round Rock Ordinance from Texas. I like it. And shout out to our friends from Round Rock and Austin who attend National League of Cities meetings. City has a rich history in cattle driving. So it's not, I like the ordinance. It's not all trees. They identify trees that are monarch trees or champion trees, and those certain trees you can't cut down without getting permission. I like that. I think that's something we might want to look at, that certain age of trees and certain growth will have protection. You have to get our permission before they cut them down, but it is not a uniform blanket restriction on cutting down trees. There are trees that are put on some type of registry, but I think it's a good idea. I do have a question for the developer, and I know this is an imperfect science, but what do you anticipate the price points being of the townhomes?
We were speaking with the developer earlier. They're not a national builder. They're not as quite as experienced, and this is a smaller area. So they thought that the median or their average would be in the high threes. High threes.
High threes.
But we understand that because of the access, it's not a marquee location, it's not a corner spot, that there's going to be some challenges. So that's what they're aiming for, but they recognize that might not be achievable, and it is in line with the median prices, about the median prices that are listed in your staff report.
Okay. They're not going to have garages or anything like that, or are they?
I'll let Jeremy answer that one.
Yeah, to be honest, don't know yet. They're still shopping what the builder, what the product might be, just to be 100% honest. So I don't know about garages yet or not. That's why we don't have a commitment on something like that.
Okay. All right. I mean, as someone who leads an organization that has bought land, it would behoove someone to do a geological survey and find out what's under the dirt. This is capitalism. You're free to fail or succeed. You're free to make a good investment, or the government can't protect you from a bad investment. But if you have any intention of building anything and you're buying land, you would want to know what's under that soil. I don't know what happened to that project next door. Maybe it was just a bad business deal. Maybe they fell under because of financial reasons. I am curious to find out. I do not know whether it's because of what was under the dirt or what was on the ledger. We don't know, and I don't want to speculate here, but I would like to find out about what happened there. What I do know is that people are moving to this city in a steady clip. What I do know is that we've made a conscious decision that we want to stop our footprint from growing, which means by definition, we are going to have to start doing infill development. It can't be any other way, or we're going to have to keep growing on the perimeter. These are the hard choices that face us. This is why we got elected, to make these hard choices. Again, I think the planning, and I am sensitive to the traffic concerns. I live in an area that's impacted by traffic, but here's what I know. If we tether or create a causal linkage between governing our municipality to what DOT is going to do or the state's going to do on any number of issues across the board, our municipality will come to a halt. That's just the reality. The state giveth and the state taketh away. I will also say that it's a much more compelling case to the state for intervention when you're on an upward incline. If we plateau and we're not growing, we are less likely to get intervention from the state. It's almost like you got to need it before they're willing to help you. So if we plateau with growth and plateau with traffic, the paradox is it actually lessens our likelihood that the state will want to prioritize us for projects. So that's just something, learned that after I got this job. So this is something to think about. But I urge approval of this project. I agree with the Planning Commission, and let's get ready for more of these kind of decisions as we stop growing outward and look to growing the city inward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments from council? All right, we have two motions for our consideration of this item. The first motion is to adopt an ordinance amending the Unified Development Ordinance by taking property out of the residential suburban -20, district -B, and establishing the same as planned development residential 7.203 and office and institutional with a development plan, district B.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Councilman Williams. Madam Clerk, if you will open the vote. If you would close the vote and report out.
The motion fails 3-3 with Mayor O'Neill, Councilmember Freeman, and Councilmember Holsey-Hymen voting no.
The second motion for our consideration is to adopt a consistency statement as required by NCGS 160D-605.
So moved.
Been moved by Councilman Williams, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem. Madam Clerk, if you will open the vote. If you will close the vote and report out.
The motion passes 5-1 with Councilmember Freeman voting no.
Right, our next item for our consideration is item 24, which is proposed updates to connection, pump station review, and flow monitoring fees. This is a non-zoning hearing, a public hearing, and we will now receive our staff report. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, Don Greeley, Department of Water Management. The item before you tonight is an ordinance amending the city's fee schedule related to three water and sewer related items. The first two, water and sewer connection fees, and the pump station review fees are existing fees and requesting those fees to be increased. The third fee is a sewer flow monitoring fee, which is establishing that fee, and we have not had it before. All the fees that are recommended reflect the actual cost that the city is incurring for these services. And with that, I'll open the floor for any questions you might have.
Right. Let's see, you have heard the report from staff, and I will now declare this public hearing to be open and will first entertain questions and comments from the council. And I think those will probably be the only questions you have is coming from the dais. We don't have anyone signed up to speak on your hot agenda item. Any questions from council persons, members? All right. And there's no one on the internet. Let me just make sure with our clerk. Is there anyone on the internet that would like to speak to this item? None from our clerk. All right. Please let the record reflect that no one has requested to speak on this item, and I will now declare this public hearing to be closed, and this matter is back before the council. Any further questions from, all right, Councilwoman Freeman.
Just a question, just thinking about the equity issue that was raised recently around folks not able to add or not able to get on to sewer as a donor. Is there any equity plan around, or just acknowledging there's some folks who have been left out who may be coming in? That rate is like 3 times what it normally would be. Is there anything to leave, like to kind of offset what that cost might be?
Unfortunately, because of the general statutes, we're required to have fees, similar fees to everybody across the board and not give any relief to any demographic area.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I appreciate Councilmember Freeman raising the equity issue as she always does and champions. I would just say these are about connection fees, and there are other areas when it comes to billing in areas where we have done, I think, significant work, actually nationally recognized work in terms of helping folk offset the cost of what the earth is mainly made of, water. So we want to make it as accessible as possible. So I do echo the concern about equity. What I take comfort in is that this isn't about the bill they get each month, and we're doing significant work in making sure that area is addressed equitably and have been commended nationally for it. Just want to say that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments from council
Just a question, when would this take effect?
If it's approved, it would be October 1st.
October 1st. Is it possible for your office to offer, I guess, any of those equity conversations that have come about, if you know of those cases or those situations where folks have not been allowed to add sewer, like has been discussed with the Nunn family specifically? If there are any others, if you could note those beforehand so we could actually move those forward so that their cost is not at this current rate that we're proposing tonight?
Certainly, we can look into that and pursue that.
Any further comments? All right, we have one motion for our consideration in this matter, and that is to adopt an ordinance amending Part 13-106 and Part 13-109 of the city's fee schedule.
So moved. So second.
And it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem, seconded by Councilwoman Caballero. Madam Clerk, if you will open the vote. And if you will close the vote and report out.
The motion passes 6-0.
Thank you for that great agenda item.
Thank you.
I missed y'all the other day. Try to get back to you. All right, we have one supplemental item. The supplemental item 26?
That's the one that was in the manager's priority memo that's been referred back.
So we will get an update, just say, well, preliminarily, let me just introduce the two co-chairs of that agenda item. They may have some comments. If you did sign up to be a part of the SCAD task force that will be led by Councilwoman Adjournment Freeman and Councilman Leo Williams, you will receive some written correspondence from the three of us regarding whether you signed up to speak at our last public hearing or you either signed up to be on the task force. So you will receive something, a memo, and I will stop at that and turn it over to the co-chairs to see if they have anything to say. It's been referred back, but I'll let you all say what you need to say. Councilwoman Freeman, Councilman Williams, you all have the floor.
I look forward to supporting the residents and those experts in the community on figuring out how SCAD could work or if it's necessary. That's all.
Look forward to having a process of engagement where we address hearing the voices of those who are concerned and getting it back before the council for us to do the work that we have to do. Thank you.
And they have been working really hard on it. We've already had a couple of conversations and some dialogue, so get ready, Durham. You're going to have a good time. I'm learning a lot about zoning and ordinances and all of that kind of stuff. With that being said, okay, we got out of here a little quicker than I thought we would, everybody. Thanks to our friends who signed up 3 times on cards. So that being said, any other thing that will claim our attention on this Monday night? Seeing none, we will adjourn at 10:03 on September 5th, 2023. Board City Strong.